Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Face Your Ears podcast. I'm Rich Bozick, and I'm joined today with Man-Made Random, a.k.a. Justin Hoshella.
That is I. Hello. How are you, Rich?
Doing well. Keeping it going here. The machine is rolling along.
Excellent. If you're listening to this podcast and you're not watching a YouTube short, I just want to make mention of Rich's clean-shaven look here. He looks about a good 10 to 15 years younger as a young man. So if you catch him in the YouTube clip, don't be surprised.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see.
Looking good.
I wanted to let everyone know, in case you didn't know, Justin kind of mentioned it. We have a YouTube presence, Face Your Ears podcast on YouTube. You could see some shorts. You could even listen through YouTube if that's what you prefer to do. What do you think about that, Justin?
I think it's fantastic. People should definitely check out the YouTube channel. I love the shorts that are there. It gives you a little more insight into who we are and what we do. But yeah, I think it's terrific, and we've gotten a lot of really good traction there, and people seem to really like it. So definitely check it out.
So we have some other news for you guys. One of our episodes, the one about AI and vocals, will be featured on Mark Matthews' Inside the Mix podcast coming up soon. He reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to have one of our episodes featured, and we gladly accepted. So stay tuned for that. And I wanted to also mention that we did interview Mark Matthews on a previous episode, 36. You should check that out.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes if you want to check it out. It's a really good one. He's a really knowledgeable, skilled producer, mixer, engineer, so definitely check that out. We're really excited to have Mark feature our episode on AI and vocals. We loved having him on the podcast. Hopefully we can have him on again sometime in the future. But for today, we're going to pivot into something a little bit different, which is in regards to live sound. We recently had quite an experience with this, Rich, right? And so do you want to tell the listeners how we came up with this topic and why we're going to be delving into it?
Sure. So it's time to get out of the studio and step out into the street.
The real world.
Yes, there is sound happening out there, folks. Sound outside the studio. So Justin mentioned we had an event. We've talked about it in the past, a little event called CLEVETOBERFEST that we had over here in New Jersey. And it went wonderfully. We had a great occasion, a great day with a lot of different performers. And it also had some local brew involved. It was truly a good experience. But we wanted to talk a little bit about the details of the sound and how to get a gig like this up and running, perhaps in your neck of the woods. We're going to break things down a little bit and talk about some of the details. And if I could just jump right in.
Sure.
So the first thing you want is to nail down the details of your event. We did an outdoor block party style event, so we need to get a permit from the town. We got all the necessary insurance and everything for that. And once we had the location secured and the date secured with permission from the higher ups, I then conscripted performers for the event. A lot of the performers were from my studio. We also had a few outside performers come in and do some things.
Including me.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Justin came down and you and Jay did a set, which was great. And once that's set, then I got the rehearsals going. And the rehearsals are important on many levels, not just to practice the songs themselves, but on a sound level, which we'll get into in a little bit. The thing I sat down and did that was very helpful was I made a schematic of the equipment and how I was going to arrange it on the stage, which was very helpful.
Just to go into that a little bit more, I think the schematic was so helpful because of the sheer amount of equipment. And so just to tick it off real quick, you've got a mixer, you've got monitors for the performers, you've got speakers for the audience, you have countless cables connecting everything, you've got microphones, many microphones, you've got a virtual drum kit, you've got all the different instruments to consider, we even had lights and electrical. So it becomes so dense and complex that you need to be able to have some sort of a map and plan in place before you go out and execute. So I think it at first blush seems, oh, it's just a little local block party, couldn't be that difficult. And it's, oh, contraire.
Yeah.
It's extremely complex. And so, like, on a technical level, one of the things that caught my attention in this process was that you really dove into your mixer's functionality quite a bit. Can you talk a little bit more about that and, like, why you did that and what you learned and so forth?
Oh, yeah. What was very helpful was getting a spreadsheet set up for the mixer. So what I did was I took my mixer, I mapped out all of the channels, the inputs, and the outputs that I was going to use. I went through and mapped out the needs for each performer. So how many guitars are we having? How many singers? I went through set by set. And so then I knew whether I had enough channels on my board and how I was going to arrange things on the board so that it made sense when we sat down behind the mixer to adjust things on the fly. I did a 2-zone monitor setup. So I had monitors in the front for mainly the singers who stood out front, and then I had monitors in a back section for the backing band. So I had to plan out the sends for that and how that was going to work. And I had my setup, I have 2 mains and a sub, and then I also borrowed 2 other like 4x10 mains to add to the front of house setup to fill it out a little more because we were outside, which was plenty. It was more than enough. So going through, basically planning out what were the needs in each band, performer, project, what instruments, planning it out on the board, putting it into a spreadsheet, and then having that all ready on the day of, so when we set things up, so we weren't lost, basically.
You used the return channels for the monitors, right? That's how you ended up using the mixer. Is that right?
I have on my mixer, I have an aux send section. I think there are 4 sends. So each channel has its own individual aux send knob. So I was able to, for each channel, assign it either to the front monitor group or the back monitor group. So if the drummer wanted more drums, but we didn't want the singers necessarily to have more drums in the front, we could do that.
Yeah. That was a really creative use of the mixer's functionality. Generally, those are used for effects and not as often with a monitoring kind of situation like that. So I thought that was a really creative sort of use of that feature and that function on the mixer. So, Rich, I noticed that you had redundancies with cables in certain equipment. And can you talk more about that?
Sure. So on the board itself, I always make sure I have a spare channel or 2 just in case something goes wrong during the live situation. Sometimes things happen, right? So you want to have that wiggle room in your board. With regard to cables, obviously, always bring extra cables just in case, of varying sizes. I did plan that out in advance, like what size cables I would use where and everything, but I had some extras and I asked people to have a few extras. With regard to getting the guitars and the bass into the setup, we didn't run the bass into the mixer. We let the bass be just freestanding because the bass carries pretty well. You just got to rein the bass player in and make sure there's no random turning up of the volume happening, which didn't happen, luckily. And then with regard to the guitars, we ran into one issue. I don't know if you recall this, Justin. We had an issue with the guitar making a lot of noise when we were running it direct.
Yeah.
And so what we did was we had an extra mic and we mic'd up the amp, and that seemed to help the situation. Now, obviously, we didn't have as much control at the board because of that, but minimized some of that noise. It was funny because even with the DI box, it didn't. I thought the DI box would help reduce some of that noise, but there was just something that day, the audio gods weren't having it.
You mentioned DI box. For people that don't know what that is, can you elaborate?
Sure. DI box, what it is, it's a little box that you run an XLR cable out of into your board, and then you could have various inputs into the box. So you could have 1/4-inch inputs. The ones I had, 1/4-inch inputs, RCA, left and right inputs, and 1/8-inch input, and even XLR inputs. And what this does is it allows you to basically extend a signal with minimal noise. So if you have something that you got to run a long distance, sometimes if you use just like a 1/4-inch cable to run something a long distance, you could get some line loss or some noise because of that, and the DI box helps to extend that signal. I also found that the DI box is good to be able to get instruments that don't have an XLR out into the snake, the stage snake. And the stage snake is like a box up on the stage that has a bunch of inputs that correspond to channels on the mixing board. And it's a way to extend the inputs of the mixing board to the stage, so you don't have to run everything to the mixing board. And the DI box allows you to convert different kinds of audio signals to XLR to be able to plug into the board easily.
Yeah. I thought it was direct input, but I just looked it up. It's direct injection.
Oh.
Whatever.
Wow. Okay. It sounds flashier.
The difference is, it's injection just sounds more important, I guess.
Yes,
I don't know. But yes, thank you for explaining that. I was less familiar with it because they're generally speaking live sound tool. They're not that you can't use them in a studio, but they're just predominantly used in live settings, I think. So it was a new experience for me, and it was cool to learn about those.
I do have a DI box set up in my studio, because what I do is the way my studio is set up is I could have a live band rehearsal down here, and sometimes I want to record that rehearsal. So I have the signal split from the DI box for the guitarists, one to go into the mixing board or one that goes directly into my DAW. So record, I can easily just fire it up and record the same signal.
Awesome. I loved how you had all of those different cables labeled. Like, it was so easy for us to just sift through them and know what was what. Everything was labeled very clearly, and the redundancy of things, like
someone finally noticed.
Yeah.
Cable labeling. It's important.
It's important. It is important. Oh my gosh. It will save you so much time because, oh, okay, I need at least 20 feet. Let me grab this 25-foot cable, have a little slack, like that kind of thing. It was great. And just having there were so many cables, and like having an extra snake was great. Can you explain what a snake is real quick? If somebody out there doesn't know what a snake is, it's a wonderful invention.
The one I have has 16 inputs and 4 outputs. And what it is, it's a box that sits on the ground on the stage, and it has a long cable extending out of it. The cable on mine is 50 feet, so you can set up your mixing board about 50 feet away from the center of where the snake on the stage sits. So you could have some distance between the stage and the mixing board so you can get a better mix. And then what happens is in that cable, there are a bunch of little cables inside of it that on the other end all plug into the mixing board. So the inputs on the stage would then, you'd plug your instruments and mics into that on stage, and then input 1 on the snake would correspond to input 1 on the mixer, etc. And so you could plug in, match it all up to where you want it in the mixing board, and then the outputs are from the mixing board on the other end of the snake with the cable. You'd plug it into your outputs on your board, and then that sends it to the outputs on the snake, so then you could then run that to the speakers, so you can output the sound to the speakers. So on mine I had 4, and I used two of them for the left and right, house left and right, and then 2 of them for the monitors front and back.
Like a very clean, fancy version of extensions, like extension cables for the audio.
Man, if you had to use it on every cable that we were running that day...
It would have been insane.
It would have been
it just makes it like, instead of having to plug everybody directly into the mixer, they just plug into the snake, which is far more convenient, far more clean and orderly. And then the snake is what plugs into the mixer. So very handy little accessory for live sound. And, I was talking about how great it was having all those labels and everything organized. That makes me think about how we had a very short amount of time for setup. And I think the equipment organization was a huge help in that regard, especially when it came to delegating the tasks for setting up the stage.
What I did was, leading up to the event, I took inventory of all the equipment I needed based on my schematic, made sure I had all the right number of cables for everything, labeled the lengths on everything, so it was easy to find what we needed. And then when we got to the location on the day of the performance, then it was easy to be like, this cable goes here, this cable goes here, so that we could be up and running faster. Because as always, no matter how much time you delegate towards setup, there's never enough time. It just never feels like enough time.
Stuff crops up, like the guitar thing, right? Like the unexpected, you should expect the unexpected. Like the guitar being really noisy and us having to pivot and figure out how to incorporate that in a way where it was sounding okay and sitting in with everything. But what other considerations come to your mind when you think about doing something like this, a live music event like this?
One of the big considerations was the electrical component. So we had our main power for the setup came from my buddy Mike's house, who we set up in front of. So we were just going to run one extension, but with the amount of speakers and instruments, amps, things like that we had plugged into the system, we decided to play it safe and run from two different circuits in his house. So I think one came from the garage and one came from his living room, actually. We ran two separate extension cables to split up the load on the circuit in the house so we don't randomly blow the circuit. So that was one consideration. Another consideration is something that we didn't do, but something to consider for future is some wireless setup for some of the microphones. We did all wired mics because the Snake was there, and that's all I had in my setup. I know if our buddy Burak, who's an RJB with us, was there, he would have insisted that I use wireless microphones for the lead vocals. And I could see why, because it allows the singer to be able to move around a little more. If you're going to do that, have some extra battery packs on hand, because those microphones can eat up batteries.
That would have been nice. But yeah, Ian, for us, it was like how long were we there? 8 or 9 hours.
Oh, we were there a long time. The show itself was, I think, close to, 5 hours or so? 5, 6, like 5 hours. Yeah. We filled it with music. There were a lot of acts and a lot of bands. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider also is to really nail down before the gig who's bringing what with regard to outside equipment, because sometimes people get very particular about, we don't want to use the amp that you have there for the guitar, so we want our own amp or our own pedal board. And to be able to better accommodate that kind of stuff, it's good to know what they're bringing and what kind of outputs it has, so you know how to run it into the board. So that's a big consideration. Justin, you were running the sound at times that night. What kind of things did you notice?
It was fairly hands-off overall, I would say. I would say there were like minor adjustments between sets. Some performers were more particular than others about adjusting their sound. I think that one of the challenges, just thinking back on it, that comes to mind for me is how loud the monitors were compared to the house speakers. And so it was almost as if we didn't need the main speakers because they were so loud. And that was a challenge, I guess, in a way, to balance that so that the performers could hear, but also the audience could hear well enough. And I think we accomplished it. I don't think there were any complaints or anything. It just goes to show like how loud that stuff is. Like, they're really powerful. Like, the equipment we had wasn't huge or anything either, but it was so powerful. It was so loud. So I think that was just an interesting observation. I don't think it created any sort of negative experience for anybody, but it was just interesting to think about that. I think, the guitar that we mentioned was definitely a challenge. I think we weren't afraid to run up because it was a very like casual affair to run up and like actually turn things down, like the bass amp or the guitar amp in mid-performance if we needed to, that kind of thing. One thing I found really helpful in running the board was just how we had the mixer itself labeled. And so just having a really clear line of sight of which singer was on which mic and like how that corresponded to the board itself. I think that was something we planned on beforehand, and it made it really easy to adjust things in the moment. for different singers and performers and so forth. So that was great.
Yeah, I made sure to, when I was planning the layout for the board, to try to group things in a way that made sense. So I put all of the vocal mics in one section on the board that were corresponding to the way you would look at the stage from left to right, and you'd have it on the board from left to right as well.
Yeah.
And putting the guitars together, and then all of the other instruments that were add-ons throughout the show. Yeah, so I'm glad you found that helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. But other than that, just stay hydrated, have a good time. It was so much fun to be a part of that and to also be a performer in that. So I performed with Same Not Same, my music duo project I do with my friend Jay, and he and I were able to incorporate into the mix of things pretty easily. We had a very different kind of set for our music. It was more electronic in nature. It was easy for us though. We just plugged into the DI boxes and went from there. But overall, what an incredible experience for all of us. Live music is so exciting and unpredictable and energetic and so on. And so it was amazing to be a part of something so diverse.
Yeah, we had stuff ranging from Broadway all the way to electronic industrial that day. So it was
awesome.
Cool. And we had a good crowd too. I think at its peak we had probably close to 200 people.
Oh, easily. Yeah, it was awesome. And what a beautiful day too, right?
Perfect weather.
It was just like a summer day and just all kinds of great food. And so, yeah, I highly endorse and recommend coordinating a block party for your neck of the woods, wherever you are.
Yeah, and I got to give my buddy Mike a shout out. This started off as just a little get together in his backyard years back where he's a brewer, a local brewer, and he would just make a few beers, invite friends over, and then eventually we started playing a little bit of live music on some acoustic guitars, and then eventually we started kicking it up a notch and playing longer sets, and then eventually he's like, you know what, I'm going to take it outside to the front and make it into an official kind of block party, and he asked if I would put together the music, and I ran with it. I was like, hell's yeah. And I just got all of the awesome performers that I get to work with all the time to be featured, and friends as well who I know who do music. So
yeah,
there we go.
Yeah, like we had John Hildreth, who's been on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
He came up from Virginia. I, of course, was there from Michigan, and my friend Jay, who coincidentally lives in that neck of the woods, came out. So yeah, it was just a wonderful community event. I loved being a part of it. So it's something that I think like AI can never replicate, right? Like this actual human beings coming together and like making music live. It's just really special, and I'm really grateful for it.
Yeah, it'll be a long ways off until with that.
Yeah, there's these humanoid robots in the market, so you never know.
Yeah,
you never know.
You'll never have to invite anyone ever again to your gigs. You could just, just get all of the robots to come. They're programmed to come to your gig. Yes. Anyways, we are glad to be able to share a little bit about our experience of this event. And just to recap a little bit, so basically planning is key. Make sure you have, if you're going to do this kind of event, you get permission from the higher ups, you secure a date, you get your personnel who are going to perform. Obviously, you got to advertise it and put the word out a little bit. And then you must rehearse. When you are in the rehearsal stage, you could start to take heed of what is needed with regard to the live sound component, and then gather your equipment. Make sure you have everything you need to fulfill the needs for the event. Make sure you plan thoroughly where you're plugging everything in, and that you have all of your cables ready and labeled. And then have a good time and execute the performance. And make sure that you have people on board who are there to help out. So if you're on stage singing, as I was at some points, and playing piano and whatnot, Justin and even John ran the board at times.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Rich, for recapping this great experience with me. I'm so glad I was able to be a part of it. And with that, we'll wrap it up, and we'll catch you in the next episode. So bye for now. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Face Your Ears podcast. If you found this episode entertaining and informative, be sure to share and leave a review. Also, check us out on social media and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more information related to our podcast, head on over to www.faceyourears.com. Links can be found in the show description. And remember, whether you're a musician just starting out or a seasoned professional looking to talk shop, it's time to face your ears.